You are not your ego. What does this mean? It means that the identity you have constructed over time, the thoughts, labels, roles, and stories that you associate with who you are, does not define your essence. The ego is a mental construct, a false sense of self that thrives on separation, comparison, and judgment. It tells you that you are your name, your achievements, your failures, your possessions, your appearance, your status. Yet none of these truly encapsulates who you are at the core. The ego operates through attachment. It latches onto things, people, and experiences, believing they can complete you or give you a sense of worth. It clings to the past, replays old stories, and projects itself into an imagined future, always searching for something to grasp onto. This creates a state of perpetual dissatisfaction, for no matter what the ego achieves or acquires, it is never enough. The ego is driven by a deep-seated fear of being nothing, of disappearing. But this fear arises because the ego is inherently unstable, built on a foundation of illusion. When you are identified with the ego, you live in a state of unconsciousness. You react to life rather than respond to it. You seek validation from others, trying to maintain an image that aligns with how you want to be perceived. You may find yourself trapped in cycles of pride and shame, success and failure, joy and despair, all dictated by external circumstances and internal narratives. This is the human condition, the suffering that arises from being lost in the ego's grip. But there is another way of being. Beyond the ego lies your true essence, the dimension of consciousness that is not bound by form or thought. This is the stillness within you, the unchanging presence that observes your thoughts, emotions, and experiences. It is not something you can acquire or achieve. It is who you already are. You do not need to strive to become it because it has always been there, waiting for you to recognize it. The shift from ego to presence begins with awareness. Notice the voice in your head, the one that narrates, judges, and comments on everything you do. Observe how it creates drama, conflict, and suffering in your life. Understand that this voice is not you. It is the ego. When you step back and witness the ego without identifying with it, you create space. In this space, the ego begins to lose its power. In the present moment, the ego cannot survive. It needs time, past and future, to sustain itself. The present moment is the gateway to freedom because it connects you to the timeless essence of who you are. In this state of presence, there is no need to defend or prove anything. You realize that your worth is intrinsic, not dependent on external factors. You become free from the compulsion to seek approval or avoid rejection. You no longer need to compare yourself to others or strive to be better than anyone else. The ego thrives on separation, but your true nature is unity. When you let go of the ego's illusions, you experience a deep connection to life and all beings. You see yourself in others, not as separate entities but as expressions of the same consciousness. This realization dissolves fear, resentment, and judgment. It allows love and compassion to flow naturally, without effort or conditions. Letting go of the ego is not an act of rejection or suppression. It is an act of understanding. You do not need to fight the ego, for resistance only strengthens it. Instead, shine the light of awareness on it. Recognize its patterns, and in that recognition, it loses its grip. The ego may still arise from time to time, but it will no longer control you. You are not your ego. You are the awareness in which the ego arises and subsides. You are the stillness beneath the noise, the presence behind the persona. This realization is the beginning of true freedom, the freedom to live authentically, fully, and joyfully. The ego is not who you are. It is a false sense of self, a construct of the mind. It feeds on identification, on the roles you play, the labels you adopt, and the stories you tell yourself about who you are. But this ego is not real. It is not your essence. It is a mask, a layer that obscures the deeper truth of your being. The ego thrives on separation, on comparison. It whispers, "I am better than this person," or "I am worse than that person." It lives in a state of lack, perpetually seeking validation, approval, or material possessions to feel whole. But no matter how much it acquires, it is never satisfied. The ego always wants more because it is disconnected from the fullness of the present moment. The essence of who you are cannot be found in thought, for thought belongs to the mind, and the mind is the playground of the ego. Who you truly are lies beneath the incessant chatter of the mind, beneath the labels and judgments. You are the stillness, the awareness that observes all thoughts, all emotions, all experiences. But the ego resists this truth, because it fears its own dissolution. It clings to its stories. I am my success. I am my failure. I am my pain. I am my past. Yet, if you look closely, you will see these are just fleeting forms, temporary identifications. They come and go like clouds in the sky. The sky remains untouched by them, vast and infinite. You are that sky. To transcend the ego is not to destroy it, but to see through its illusions. It is to recognize that your value, your worth, your very existence does not depend on anything external. It is intrinsic, eternal, unshakable. The ego may continue to arise, but when you are rooted in presence, it loses its grip. You can see it for what it is, a shadow, a phantom, a thought form. The path to freedom lies in awareness. When you bring the light of awareness to the workings of the ego, its patterns begin to dissolve. When you stop identifying with it, you reclaim your power. You no longer react out of fear, pride, or insecurity. You respond from a place of clarity, peace, and compassion. In this state of presence, you discover a deeper connection, not just with yourself but with all of life. The boundaries created by the ego dissolve, and you realize the oneness of existence. You see that beneath the surface differences, we are all expressions of the same universal consciousness. This realization transforms how you live. No longer are you driven by the ego's endless cravings or fears. You live with simplicity, gratitude, and joy. You see the sacredness in the ordinary, the beauty in the here and now. You are not your ego. You are the awareness that sees it, the presence that transcends it. When you live from this awareness, you step into the fullness of life. You are free, for you have returned to your true self, the timeless, formless essence that has always been and always will be. The essence of who you are is not confined to the thoughts in your mind, the roles you play, or the image you project to the world. What most of us call I is a collection of identifications, memories, desires, and fears, a construct of the mind known as the ego. This ego convinces you that it defines your existence, that without it, you are nothing. It attaches itself to the fleeting and impermanent, your possessions, your achievements, your appearance, and even the validation of others. Yet none of these things are truly who you are. They come and go, rise and fall, leaving the ego in a constant state of craving, dissatisfaction, and fear of loss. When you live from the ego, life becomes a perpetual chase. You seek happiness in future outcomes, in external recognition, in the accumulation of status or material things. But no matter how much you attain, it never feels like enough. This is because the ego is insatiable. Its very survival depends on its constant dissatisfaction, on keeping you trapped in an endless cycle of striving and wanting. But who are you without these mental stories? Who are you when the noise of the mind subsides, even for a moment? There is a deeper presence within you, a stillness that is not touched by the comings and goings of the external world. This is your true self, pure awareness, unconditioned by past or future, untouched by the judgments of the ego. It is not something you can think your way into. It is something you realize by being fully present in the now. When you awaken to the truth that you are not your ego, a profound shift begins to occur. You no longer feel the need to defend an image, to compare yourself to others, or to cling to the things and ideas that once defined you. You begin to experience life not through the lens of lack and separation, but through the fullness and unity of the present moment. The mind, which once ruled over you, becomes a servant instead of a master. And in this space of presence, you discover a peace and joy that is not dependent on circumstances. This awakening is not a far-off destination. It is here, now. It requires only that you turn your attention inward and question the voice in your head that constantly narrates your life. Is it true? Who is the one listening to these thoughts? In that simple act of awareness, the grip of the ego begins to loosen, and you glimpse the timeless essence of who you are. You are not the roles you play, the opinions you hold, or the things you own. You are not your successes or your failures. You are the silent witness to it all, the unchanging presence in which all experiences arise and fade. When you know this, you are free not in some abstract mystical sense, but in a way that profoundly transforms how you live, how you relate to others, and how you experience the world. So, let go of the need to define yourself, to defend yourself, to seek yourself in the fleeting and impermanent. Be still and know that you are. In that knowing, all striving ceases, and you realize that what you were searching for was never outside you. It was always here in the simplicity of being. The essence of who you are is not your ego. The ego is a construct, a fleeting identity that we adopt to navigate the world, but it is not the truth of your being. The ego thrives on separation, on defining itself as I in opposition to you. It seeks validation, clings to achievements, and defines its worth by comparison. Yet, in all its pursuits, the ego remains insatiable, always striving for more recognition, more possessions, more power, only to find that fulfillment is always just out of reach. But you, the real you, are not this restless entity. You are the awareness behind it, the still presence that observes the ebb and flow of thoughts, emotions, and sensations. This awareness is unchanging, untouched by the fleeting dramas of the ego. It is vast, limitless, and connected to the essence of all life. The ego wants to convince you that it is indispensable. It says, "Without me, who will you be?" But consider this. Have you ever paused and truly looked at the space between your thoughts? Have you ever felt the stillness that arises when you are fully present? In those moments, the ego recedes, and what remains is your true self. Peaceful, complete, and at one with the universe. The ego is not inherently bad. It has its place as a tool for functioning in the world. But the problem arises when we mistake it for who we are. When the ego dominates, we become reactive, defensive, and disconnected. We lose sight of the simple truth that life is not a problem to be solved or a competition to be won. Life is a gift, a dance, a flow of experiences to be embraced. When you step beyond the ego, you step into presence. Presence is not something you can achieve. It is already here, waiting for you to notice it. It reveals itself in the quiet moments when the mind is still, in the sound of the wind through the trees, in the rhythm of your breath, in the eyes of another being. Presence is where you find your true self, free from the illusions of the ego. As you become more aware of the ego, you will begin to see its patterns. How it resists, how it judges, how it clings to the past or projects into the future. With awareness, you can choose not to identify with it. You can simply observe it without judgment, as you would a passing cloud. And in that observation, the ego loses its grip. You do not need to fight the ego or conquer it. Simply be aware of it, and its power will dissolve like a shadow in the light. This is not an act of doing but an act of being. In being, you remember that you are not the voice in your head. You are the silence that listens. Let go of the need to define yourself by labels, roles, or achievements. Let go of the stories the ego tells you about who you are. These are just narratives, not the essence of your being. Who you are cannot be captured in words. You are the space in which life unfolds, the consciousness that experiences it all. And when you live from this place of presence, the world changes. You no longer act out of fear, anger, or greed. Your actions arise from love, compassion, and wisdom. You become a channel through which the universe expresses its infinite creativity and abundance. So, remember this, you are not your ego. You are the awareness beyond it, the light that shines eternally, the presence that connects all things. In this realization lies the freedom to live fully, to love deeply, and to be at peace with what is.